I look like I had the day off, which I did. All right. A little bit of a shambles, but okay. This is going to be a crazy chunk of time, guys. This year has just been reevaluated. So we're examining our future in the next week here. Oh man, this is going to be definitely an interesting year. We're going to have a very interesting time over the next. Honestly, I would almost guarantee you the next week and a half is going to be amazing. Like, and I don't necessarily mean that in a good way. We're looking down the barrel of things that we haven't seen ever in anybody's living lifetime that I can remember. We've got a couple 105-year-olds living in the world today. They may have seen something similar to this early on, but no, I mean, this is going to be very different. So unless I'm missing my guess, unless I'm being especially reactionary, by Sunday, the United States is going to start looking sort of like Italy is looking today, or like Italy looked a week ago. So I fully expect more information about soon-to-be major cities in the U.S. being locked down and people being required to stay in their houses. Businesses shut down everywhere. So I'm expecting what I need to do over the next few days is stock up a little bit on certain things. And I expect by the end of next week to not have a job. Either job. So I expect to not have a job. And I expect that we are not going to get a shot before then at stocking up too many food items. So I got to find what I can find and figure out how to ration it in such a way that it'll last me. It shouldn't be too hard. I can usually manage that pretty well. But with that in mind, going forward, I'm not going to be hard pressed for anything to do. I have plenty of creative things, and I have a fair number of things that I would love to do online here that can provide not only me something to do, but provide other people with something they can do with their time. Because I feel like I'm not going to be the only one who's going to be cooped up and want something to do with their time. Now, the hard thing for me, I think right now is I need to plan not only for the projects I want to do next little while, but I also need to see if I can get down to my storage and grab some things from there. Because it's going to be a spare minute. It's not going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be very interesting. Historically speaking, we've not seen anything like this in modern memory. The Spanish flu had moments like this, but I mean, Spanish flu is probably going to end up still being the number one killer out of the two of these things. But this is still going to rank up there with something that changes the way the world works. It'd be very fascinating to be able to look at it from a future perspective, to understand its place in history. and to be aware of it while it's happening. This is going to be such a crazy year. Wow. Yeah. It's hard to imagine what we're going to do from here on out. Like, I don't know that in my lifetime there has ever been a time where we're like, projections are currently that we're looking at the possibility of a 20% unemployment rate by June, or at least by the end of the year. And if that's the case, that's gonna do some economic damage. Businesses are definitely going to be closing, because if we do a lockdown the way we really ought to do a lockdown, businesses are not going to be able to afford to keep employees, and they're not going to make enough money, because daily sales are an important factor in keeping many businesses afloat. And we're not going to be able to sustain that if we do what we have to do as a quarantine and lockdown. So if that becomes the scenario, we're going to see massive contraction economically. People will lose businesses. Businesses will close. Major businesses will shrink drastically. Unemployment's going to be horrendous. The ability to afford rent is not going to happen. That's why a lot of states are currently putting a moratorium on mortgage and rent and utility payments. But they're not actually putting a moratorium on those payments. So what we're looking at as we go forward in the next couple weeks is we're going to have, I mean, by Sunday, I would almost wager you, Sunday night, we're going to start hearing stories of the inability of emergency rooms and hospitals to keep up on an individual level. By the end of next week, it's really going to hit the point where we hear stories of an increased mortality rate, because people are having to make the decision about whether or not person A is likely enough to benefit from treatment that they can be prioritized for the equipment needed. So basically what that means is you have person A, person B, maybe even person C, and you take a hard look at them and say, we've got equipment enough to save one, but not three. So they're going to be asking the question, which one is the most likely to survive therapy, and we'll invest the effort into taking care of that one person. And I think that's probably what we're going to see within the next week and a half to 2 weeks. And from there, we're going to be looking at similarities to Italy, and probably where Spain is headed soon too, and a little bit of what Germany's doing. So I don't think we'll necessarily be like National Guard at the end of every major road, restricting people's ability to travel anywhere based off of, do you have written permission forms that state that your function in an environment is important enough to allow you free travel. I don't think we're going to quite get there, but we may have those pressures put in place. And that means that a lot of people are not going to be working. A lot of people are not going to be earning paychecks. And a lot of people are going to be facing the question of whether or not they can pay their rent. The state I'm in right now has sort of said that they are preventing landlords and utility companies, like they're preventing landlords from evicting people for not payment, but they're not saying you don't have to pay. So what this really ends up meaning is they can't evict you for not paying, and the landlord can't be, have their property seized for not paying their mortgage and whatnot, but they're still responsible for those payments. So when the quarantines are lifted and those protections get lifted with that, those people will still be responsible for all the back pay. And that's at a point where they won't have managed to find work again. Work won't just suddenly pick back up where everything left off. So they're going to be people who are not working, who are now responsible not only for their current rent, but it's going to be at least a month, 2 months minimum backup. And if they can't meet those, then we're going to see more homeless. And it's not a good position for anybody to be in. And that's not even counting things like medical bills for anybody who gets sick. And that's not counting food budget. Like, you're not working, you're not getting paid. Supposedly, we're supposed to be able to file for unemployment. But like, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Because I don't think we have the infrastructure or the experience to handle this situation in a way that makes sense. There's going to be a lot of damage that happens because of this. I'm very curious to see where it goes from here. For me right now, I think what I'm looking at is, I'd wager I've probably got maybe another week, depending on which scenarios turn out for which jobs. I maybe have another week before things get bad enough that the companies just starts cutting employees. And I think we probably at most have we have a week before that happens, I think, and then 2 weeks in, the company's probably going to have to shut the doors. I don't know. I'd be curious. Look, we provide food and cleaning products and sanitation supplies. I'd wonder if, to a certain degree, we're protected to a certain degree. One of the things I'm doing right now does that. The rest of it was mostly just like voluntary kind of stuff, sort of. But I would wager you good money that we might have a little more leeway to keep running than other companies. But we are definitely a retail environment, and that retail environment will need some major changes to keep going. Like, we are situated in such a position that we require that customers come to us and make purchases in a shopping environment. That's just not going to happen. Come 2.5 weeks from now, if we're still doing that, we're doing stuff wrong. And honestly, there's a part of me is like, they should let us stay home. we're exposing ourselves to the general public pretty riskily. So I feel like the hazards of this scenario, like, I don't know that I want to keep exposing myself to people. No, well, that sounds like that's a horrible way to phrase that. Phrasing. I don't want to necessarily keep being at risk for exposure to the pathogen. So it's sort of a question of trade-off. Like, I'm pretty sure I can eat. We've got tap water. We have electricity. They're not supposed to be able to turn any of those off on us. Ear infection's driving me nuts. All right, and then, I mean, supposedly we'll have access to most of those things we need. The hard ones are going to be the expendables, the toilet papers, and the food. I can stock up a little bit more this week and probably a little bit more next week. But the patterns we've seen happening in Italy, we are matching it, if not doing worse. We're just 10 days behind as a country. So that's not a good thing. So we've got to sort of plan and prepare to be facing where Italy has gone. Now, the shelter in place aspect of that is something I could do fairly well. I mean, honestly, for a good chunk of previous years, dealing with a chronic illness that I have. There were times where 6 months would go by and I didn't leave the house. No, I mean, other than for grocery runs. So really, I think I could probably handle that portion fairly well as long as we can get the supplies. But, and then, yeah, I mean, from there, it's really just sort of like how I use my time. And I just, between getting ready food supply wise and getting things that I can do for creating video content, that's what I'm going to try to do for the next week or two. I may have set this to private. I don't think I did, but we'll find out when I finish up here. I think I'm pretty much done for tonight. It's not what I was looking to do to a video on tonight, and I did post something up earlier today. But we shall see where things go. I will be back on tomorrow. No idea what I'll be doing for a video tomorrow, but I will do a little bit more update about what it looks like next week's going to look like for me. So I will talk about my plans tomorrow, explore the opportunities available to us all. I don't know. It's never been anything like this in my lifetime, and I'm very kind of, I'm not going to treat it lightly. I mean, I may make some jokes here and there, but that's just part of the experience, I think. But I'm not happy, but I'm fascinated. I'm aware enough of the circumstances we're in to be fascinated about its historical impact from this point on. It's sort of like a morbid fascination, admittedly. But I'm very, like, we've reached the point already where 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road from now, this is an event that's referred to historically, like the bombing of Pearl Harbor, or, I mean, I guess the other equivalent is the Spanish flu. But it's reached the size where it's going to have that blip on the history timeline. This isn't just a, it's harsh to say it, but the last 2 or 3 outbreaks of Ebola in Africa, they happened in Africa. They had a little anxiety about whether or not they'd spread and become pandemic. But, like, can you remember which years had the big outbreaks? Most people outside of the countries they happened in can't remember them. I mean, it was a thing that they vaguely remember happened a while ago. And this is already past that point. This is sort of on par with 9/11 and maybe even the Kennedy assassination, where it's the sort of thing where you're supposed to remember what was going on in your life when the world changed. We're there. The question is, at this point, how much more changed are we going to get? And the models that I'm seeing suggest that we have, the vast majority of the population has no concept of how drastically things are about to change. I think in my mild rant the other night, I did kind of explain to a certain degree, this isn't just, an epidemic that's happening. This is economically going to change the world. This is technologically forcing things to happen that we have looked at, futurologists that I associate with, we've all sort of looked at these things and said, like, these are things that are going to have to change. And we expected a more gradual change, but we don't have that gradual time anymore. The world's about to change. Now the question is, will the world try to change back? And if it does, how is everything going to respond to that attempt to shoehorn it back to the way it was? Because I guarantee you, when they end the protections against evictions, but they don't do anything to protect the people from massive gouging. Well, it's telling me my connection is unstable, so I guess I'm going to get off for the night. I don't know why it's behaving like this lately. All right, I'm out. Have yourself a good one.